リチャード・マレー。彼は1971年から75年にかけてフォワードエアコントロールと呼ばれる任務についていた。このプロジェクトは特殊な飛行物体、つまり UFO を調査するというもので、全米各地からハワイに至るまであらゆる地域で UFO をキャッチ、調査した。存在を否定しながら調査する意味は何か。
On numerous occasions, we ran across strange flying objects that make 90-degree turns and go from 0 to 10,000 miles an hour and go completely off the sweep of our radar. And because we were mobile command, we were used many times just to monitor this activity. We found that we had an unlimited amount of budgeting all of a sudden. And we found that we had special digitizers that were attached to us that were 72-hour tapes that would be controlled. And they would be then couriered to a person that would take it and we'd never see it again. And it would go to some high command. A lot of times we had code names for everything that we did. And on many occasions, I have seen close contacts with UFOs. They've come right in close to us to let us know they're there. And everybody would bail out of their radar vans and go out and look at them. And they would just, gone. On many occasions, from Mauna Kea, the top mountain in the Big Island, we witnessed UFOs underneath the water. I mean, the military does not have a vehicle that will travel 400 to 500 knots underwater. See, and when you see 3 or 4 illuminated balls underwater just booking, I mean, they're just traveling, and you're on the mountaintop and you see these things. It leads me to believe that not only are they on our surface, but they do base themselves underwater. On one occasion, we spotted anywhere from 50 to 200 UFOs coming out of the triangle and going across the panhandle of the state. A squadron flew over Plains, Georgia. And we understand that President Carter, at that time he was Governor Carter, had witnessed these craft. We were in space long before the space program ever started. There's a gentleman by the name of Bill Cooper who has shown photographs of Earth from the moon dated 1958, 1959. And gentlemen, we were not on the moon, and we had nothing in space until 1968. We were already developing on the moon when Kennedy was in office. The General Secrecy Act is what I was blanketed under until 1982, where my life was threatened once for talking about UFOs and talking about what I knew about it. And at that time, a dear friend of mine, Colonel, was then just snatched right off the street. He was put in prison for 5 years, and I went into hiding for 3 years. I just received a phone call about a gentleman who was abducted. I'm going to have an interview with this gentleman. He's somewhat scared. He was out rabbit hunting. He was hit with a beam of light, and his friend saw him get hit. Now his friend's been abducted. It's quite incredible where this is going on and how many cases of this type are going on. They're all happening up around Dreamland, which is Edwards Air Force Base. Remember this, wherever they build the most sophisticated aircraft is where they are holding alien aircraft.
For instance, last Wednesday night, my son was walking by the sliding glass door in our home, and he called me. I came over. He said, look, and I looked, and that mountain, which is the backside of Big Bear, 2 large lights, I mean really large, larger than landing lights, brilliant. I have 3 people that I know that I feel are very credible. One worked for me, and just recently she had an abduction experience from right out here. And then the other 2, one is in Barstow, which is north of where we live here. And, you know, they've told me their experience, and I have no reason not to believe them. They're very credible. I know them. And you don't, you know, I've never had an abduction experience. I personally don't want to. I'm happy with just seeing the light phenomena.
Right directly above the mountaintops in the proximity of the flags you see there, and probably the height of the top of the telephone pole, were 2 golden globes. Size was hard to determine, much larger than a star. if in fact they are aliens, and they have been around as long as some people seem to say they've been around, why aren't we made aware of it? If it was for good, I would think we would know about it. And someone is trying to keep this from us, and I think there's no good behind it, frankly.
When we looked up there, there was huge lights. I've never seen them so bright. And they were right up over there.
And this is a mountain out in the Indian reservation here in the valley called Red Mountain by the Indians, and considered to be one of the most sacred mountains in the area. Over the mountain came a large light, pulsating, not making any noise at all. It was golden light interspersed with an emerald green color. And they all were amazed by it because it made no noise whatsoever, and then it proceeded over the edge of the mountain and flew directly in with no explosion or no crash or nothing of the sort. Well, they obviously were all wondering what it was and what could it possibly be. Well, that's not unusual here because there's been many sightings reported at this area, not only now, but in the past as well, because the Indians talk a great deal about this area and this mountain as being a place to communicate with the sky gods. UFOs just didn't start in the 1940s when it officially became the modern UFO history, but they go back as far as recorded time. It's as ancient as this land and probably as long as this land has been here. Whether they draw them on the pictures and inside cave walls or they record them in their ancient script, there's always been the evidence from culture to culture. It's UFOs cut across all cultural lines. It's something that everyone knows and can relate to, no matter where they are or who they are.
I used to live on a tropical island, Aruba. It's 18 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And I was walking home from the beach one day, and I must have been about a half a mile from my house, and I heard this very strange humming. And I looked up into the sky, and lo and behold, about 200 yards above me, there was a silver ship hovering and gliding along in the sky. I knew that my friends wouldn't believe me if I told them that I saw it, so I started yelling, and my next-door neighbor came out, Mr. Fredrickson, and he's about 45 years old, and he saw it with me. And we actually saw a wall of energy that went all the way up into space, and you could actually stop. It was like a wall of electron energy or something, and you could actually stop. We stopped the car, and actually we were putting our hands through this wall of energy, and we were looking up the wall of energy off into space, and we felt like there might have been some kind of an energy dome over the area that we were living in. And then for maybe about a week, we were having all kinds of strange experiences on the island, strange energy fields, and there was like a whole presence, some kind of a force. I grew up in the island, so I was very familiar with the island and the feeling of the island, and there was something had definitely changed. Once you see one, you become a knower. You no longer are a believer. In the same way, if you're a Christian, let's say if you experience God, you would be a knower of God and not just a believer of God. You know, and so the thing is, once you see a ship like that, you become a knower and no longer a believer. So all of the knowledge that you're building is more to develop the understanding of that experience. Yeah.
My name is Vicki Cooper, and with my partner, Sherry Stark, I co-publish UFO Magazine, which is the most legitimate and most wide-ranging journalistic effort to cover UFOs in the United States. The combination of us accepting that there are other dimensions and that quantum theory really has something to say about the nature of reality is the same as us accepting that life may have many, many faces that we're unaware of, that we may discover as we open ourselves more to the idea of UFOs and the idea of alien life forms other than humans. We have many people on this planet, let's face it, that are still in a very primitive state of mind, okay? Collectively, this planet, the species on this planet, human beings, I think do need to grow and open up or move forward, as you say, in their consciousness, okay? However, I think there are seedbeds of people who are very ready right now to accept and move into that awareness just like that.
Well, my full name is Virgil Armstrong, post-Lithwaite. I go under the name of Virgil Armstrong for lecturing purposes, for writing my books and other things which I'm engaged in. I'm a retired military officer, having served 22 years in the service. I was 9 years with the CIA, 10 years with the Green Berets, and other high-level assignments with the United States government. I retired in 1962, and later became very interested in the subject of UFOs as we know them today. Prior to that, though, my direct involvement in the field of ufology had to do with an incident which took place in 1948 at White Sands, New Mexico, and was the second capture of the first UFO, I should say the second capture of a UFO here in our United States. There is amongst us a malefic group of extraterrestrials who do not have our best interest at heart. And documentary-wise, commentary-wise, and so forth, we've established that their arrival took place in the 1950s during the Truman administration. And that our government, and probably world government, made a pact with these extraterrestrials that if they were to share with us their ability to travel extraterrestrially, in other words, their technology to travel extraterrestrially, that we would in turn allow them to use our people as guinea pigs for biological research. In other words, testing them through our enzymes, genetic splices, possibly blood, and as we know now, in some cases, even spare parts, arms and legs and things of this nature. The threat that we're looking at is that these people are far superior to us in terms of mentality and technology, and through this means have controlled us as well as other world governments to enable us to do their bidding, which of course is to basically farm us, if you would like. That's a very crass term, but that's exactly what it is, to farm us. Rather than fighting all of this as opposing nations as we have in the past, we now are trying to cooperate, and we're trying to live together in peace and tranquility and pacification. And as a result of this, too, the great leaders, that is the great heads of government, such as Gorbachev, Reagan, and now Bush, are trying to cooperate to a degree that they can maintain stability, at the same time move through this major spiritual transformation which is taking place. And that's not an easy thing to do. This man Gorbachev is to be greatly lauded because he's really got his hands full. I wouldn't want his job for all the tea in China, and I don't think anybody else would either. And I'm not so sure that anybody else could handle it but him. Again, we have to look at them in their totality also as a spiritual test. Every bit of this is illusion. Every bit of this is something which is being obscured from our true sense of knowing, and I should say knowingness. Everything lies within your heart and your mind and your soul as well as mine. We cannot ever hope to deter any and all of this physically, technologically, or mentally. It has to be done spiritually. As I've reiterated already, this is a spiritual test and a spiritual time.
I was in the military service for 27 years. And as I began my research years and years ago, I was a skeptic. And while I was in the service, and I was assigned at SHAPE headquarters in Paris, France for almost 5 years, I had an opportunity to see classified military files, study them, and I learned there, beyond a shadow of a doubt, of the reality of the UFO phenomenon. I also learned something about the commanding generals over there, and developed a strong case of paranoia involved with the UFO phenomenon, because they didn't know how to deal with the reality that they had discovered. They had discovered extraterrestrial visitation. I don't necessarily believe in UFOs. I know the reality of them. I've seen the facts. I've seen the evidence. But I began as a skeptic, curious, unconvinced, uncertain, and I think that was a good place to begin. It was a safe place to begin. And then as I began to learn over the years and gather more and more evidence and realize what was really happening out there, then I became convinced of the reality of it. I'm not fearful of any kind of a threat. A lot of people are. There's a strong feeling of paranoia, particularly among ranking military people and some people in government. They're convinced that we're going to be conquered and invaded and taken over. I've dug into this enough over the years that it's convinced me that we have nothing to be fearful of. That the technologies that are represented there are so advanced, and they've been serving us for so long, that if they had wanted to take us over, they would have done it a long time ago. And our so-called vaunted military prowess and our technology here would mean nothing to them. No, I'm not threatened. I don't think that that was their intent in the first place. When I retired from the service in '76, the government at that point knew of 4 separate civilizations that were visiting. And one of those cultures, biologically, the people looked exactly like we do. They could put on a suit or a coat and tie or a dress and go into a restaurant, walk down the street, and you'd never know. Unless they decided to tell you, you'd never know. And that excites me some, because I think I've met a couple over the years. I think we're related to those people. Several researchers have concluded that we may be cousins. A number of us have concluded that we are probably a seeded race here on this planet, and that they were involved not merely in our development, growth, and evolution, but they were involved in putting us here. I had an opportunity to work with the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and I learned over the years that they have a very sophisticated disinformation program based upon the fact that they've decided not to tell the truth to the public. But there are times when the public gets awfully close to certain things. So they have to ridicule and give out disinformation to divert the public's attention from something that's legitimate into something that isn't. And I've seen that work. Some of the people I served with were involved in that program. And they're very good at it. And one of the things they use over the years in the disinformation program are the so-called crackpots that we all know so well about. There are these little groups and individuals and people all over the world who wear the little silly hats with the antenna, and they get together with the meetings, and they have parties and so on with the visitors and such. And some of them are some really fringe people, and some of them, I think, probably need to be cared for. Maybe they're not dangerous, but anyhow, they exist. And the government has continually pointed to them and given them a lot of attention and given them a lot of press exposure to lead people with the idea that that's the UFO phenomenon. That's all there is to it. A bunch of crackpots. And the public at large and a lot of the media follow them, the crackpots, the fringe people, because they're colorful, they're exciting, they're fun. But that's not the reality of the real UFO research. It has nothing to do with the scientists and the pilots, military and civilian, and the top people in government that have spent years looking at this phenomenon and realize that it's real. There's a truth here. There are facts here. There's evidence here. And if the people take the time to really look at what's available and look at the evidence and examine the evidence, my God, we've got enough evidence that in a court of law, we have more than enough evidence to convict. But sadly, it's not that simple with the UFO phenomenon, because we are dealing with government disinformation. And some of my friends are still working for the government. And they're good. And I'm tempted to name their names, but I can't. We've retrieved several ships. One I know of in particular was a crash up near Kingman some years ago, where there was a crew of 2 aboard. One was injured and one was in good condition. They retrieved the ship, they retrieved the crew. They took the ship and the crew off to a secret government laboratory, which is not too far from Las Vegas. And they kept the 2 crew members alive for some time. It's a very sensitive subject, and if you are not particularly careful, a military person can end up at Fort Leavenworth. He can end up being sentenced to prison. He can end up being fined. He can be forfeiting all of his pay and allowances, not only what he has had, but everything he would yet to ever earn. That's a rather frightening kind of threat to hang over their heads. So a lot of my friends and associates are rather closed-mouthed about it. But as they get older, like I am, they get to a point, well, I think it's time to talk about it. Well, one of the things that troubles me the most, I guess, is that how few people really understand and have really taken the time to look at the evidence and to dig into it. There's an enormous amount of material out there that's available to people. But you do have to make an effort. You have to dig a little bit. I'm continually amazed at the number of people who simply either are not concerned, are not aware, and it doesn't seem important to them. And I don't understand that, because to me, the fact that we are being surveyed, visited, analyzed by extraterrestrial cultures is mind-boggling. The ramifications for the human race and the planet Earth are overwhelming. The fact that we are not alone, that we are a part of a much larger community. And I find that exciting. And I find that that impacts upon the future of the human race. And I cannot imagine someone not being interested in that, not wanting to dig in and learn and gather all the information that they possibly could. You know, it's time we really do address this, that we are not alone, that there are other civilizations out there. And not trying to sound like this is a religious kind of thing, but the philosophical and the psychological implications for the human race are staggering. Do you realize what it might do to our view of ourselves and the petty problems we deal with continually? Politics, ethnic origins, fights, arguments. There are wars going on right now. If we could realize that we weren't alone, that we were part of a much larger community, that idea in itself might bring about some kind of an expansion of consciousness in people, which I think would be good for the human race.
In any case, we have to remember that the security of the power structure depends on the anonymity of the Majestic 12.
Now that we can no longer use the Russians as the evil empire, we can use the aliens to increase the budget of our defense appropriations.
What we tell the Congressional Appropriations Committee is another story.
There are many opinions in government on how to handle the UFO information. As you know, some high-ranking officials in the administration want to release the facts. The question is how we can do that without having egg on our face.
It's only a matter of time until the general public finds out anyway. We expect that there will be a lot more contact with ETs in the 90s on a global scale.
We've got to get control of this UFO situation because, gentlemen, peace is not good for business.
Peace is good for business, General. Pollution control, cleaning up the environment, repairing the ozone layer are billion-dollar businesses. We could have a zero jobless rate. Developing peaceful new technologies could replace the defense budget.
The only answer to the question of UFOs is that there is no answer. All we can do is to be prepared for anything that may occur on our relationship with the extraterrestrials. We must keep an open mind. We've got to go into the future without fear. Gentlemen, we're entering a new decade, a new century, and a new age of mankind.
At this point, we'll have to continue our meeting in a closed-door session. Thank you for your participation and your valuable insight.